Hey, welcome back to Tactics Talk with Guido. Thanks for tuning in. I've got a replay analysis for you here from Nonamandus. He's driving his AT-8 Tier 6 British TD, big casemate TD. Sent me a note and he said he's looking for some tips and tricks on the British TD line. He says it's god-awful. Way too slow to avoid arty, yeah, to some extent. Subpar armor, not exactly. We'll talk about that in a minute. Bad gun depression, bad traverse, and a meh pen and alpha. The alpha is definitely low. I think the pen tier for tier is actually pretty good, and the gold rounds are not bad at all. It says then you get stuck bottom tier, you become target practice. What is the best strategy for success? And he sent me this in. He said he thought this was his best game so far. Well, those are some interesting comments. I will disagree slightly with a couple of them. The armor tier for tier is pretty good. I wouldn't rely on it. There's almost no tanks I would rely on armor with, except maybe a super heavy like a Mauser or Type 4, and even then, depending on what's shooting at you, you can't rely on it because of number 2, or it's just got a massive gun. Still, tier for tier, it's actually a pretty good tank. It does have a big weak spot, the big tumor on the top, but that is kind of difficult to hit at range, so close in, that's definitely an issue. What are some of its strengths? Well, it does fire fast. It's got quite a rate of fire, although its alpha is very low. This means that it is pretty good at sniping at targets out in the open and machine gunning them down. And it is also pretty good late game on getting into wounded tanks and tearing them down as well, provided you can preserve some HP. And that's pretty standard across the board in this game anyway. So the question becomes, how do I play this? Well, it's the same answer with every tank, but it's a little bit more critically important with this. And it has to do with positioning and where do I go during a game? How do I react? If you're driving a slow tank, and especially a slow casemate TD, your initial position has a lot to do with how well you do, and your reaction to the game flow and how fast you see things developing also has a lot to do, because you can get left behind very quickly, or you can get left in the lurch very quickly, as in overextended. So we're on Lakeview right here. Let's talk about all that as we go. I'll go ahead and get going here. And we've decided to go over to the valley. So Nonamandus, right off the bat, I would disagree with this initial positioning. You have quite a few guys going over there. Where would I be with this tank? I would go right here, potentially up to that little ridge, and look for shots as this 30-45 lights anything crossing up here that might get lit, or anybody who starts to troll down in here. Potentially later on in the game, shots through this alleyway right here as they try to tuck up against the church, so supporting that. That is probably the best standard position, and if I was feeling aggressive, I would actually, in this case, go with my glob that's going down into the city and help them clean out the city with the firepower of this thing and the decent armor. Plus, it's actually got some pretty interesting capability to poke around corners as long as the corner of the building is over here on the right side. So that's the aggressive move. I would say this is the standard good TD move. I would say this would be the third choice, what you're doing right here. And the problem with going over here is there's so many. Where do I even start? Number one is any artillery, and there are 2 on the enemy team, is going to be looking right here if they're covering valley. And they will be covering valley because they're going to figure there's lots of easy hit points if anybody tries to push up and over that ridge. Also, the enemy team isn't going to come over that ridge when you've got multiple tanks like you have right there hanging out on the other side of that ridge. Plus, they don't want to deal with TDs over there. So this really just becomes a bit of a shit show over here of everybody camping and poking and prodding and trying to see if anyone else is on the other side of this ridge. The other team sends quite a few tanks, which is quite interesting. One of them is a KV-3. Now that I saw the KV-3, maybe you're okay to hang out there, but guess what? If you'd have seen that and you'd have been over on the corner, the other corner, you could have come back and helped them. And that's the other problem with going there initially, that like you did right there. Because that fight takes so long to develop, you're not going to get any shots. Now you lost your guy in the middle, so I see you crossing back over, and that's not a bad idea. You're going to see the Tiger 131 and the Churchill 1 are going to actually camp down there in the south. There's a lot of salt. For those of you who are watching this, go ahead and read read the chat and the comments. There's lots of "you're terrible" and "your stats are bad," and so if you enjoy that kind of salt, Pay attention because it is incoming. Now we got a Cromwell out in the open right here, a little rise right there, and I would be stopping right there and shooting him. Stop. No, no, no. Oh. And now you're ignoring him. So at least 2 shots, and if you detract him, maybe more, left on the table right there. I'd have definitely stopped and let that Cromwell have it. Now the city is not fighting too much, and as a matter of fact, stop real quickly, if you add up all those tanks, plus the artillery, it comes up to about 11 to 13 tanks shown on the board, which means they really don't have anything in the town. And that gives your guys in the town a huge opportunity. If the Churchill and Tiger 131 had been with them, they would be eating those guys up even faster. So now it comes into the part of the game where, alright, so I positioned here on this corner. Initially I went to the other corner. Now I've come to this corner as a reaction, but I'm not seeing anything. So what do I do with my casemate TD? My gun hasn't fired yet. How do I get my gun back into the game? 2 choices, really. I would not say the choice is anymore going to the town. So that's out the window. You're not going into town. All right, well, there's a guy right there. It's foolishly got himself spotted. Boom. Shot behind him. Shot behind him. Now, we're going to get back to the positioning thing, but let's talk really quickly about the mechanics of those shots. The first one was fine. The second and third one shot behind him because you're basically pointing right at the target. And the target has a line of sight from the right to the left. This means you need to zoom out a little bit more. I wouldn't go all the way out, but you do need to open up your sniper zoom a little bit from there so that you can shift your aim to lead fire in front of the Cromwell as opposed to shooting right at him. If you zoom all the way in and the Cromwell is taking up most of your view, you don't have a good idea of how to get lead on the guy. So zoom out, get your lead fire, and then lead the shot on that guy. Additionally, the other thing that does with a casemate TD is it lets you know when you're getting close to the azimuth stop on the gun, and you may in fact want to shift your casemate or shift your hole early while you're in the reload just to set up for that next shot because you know that that's where that guy is going. Those are just some mechanics thoughts for casemate TDs. A little bit more difficult with this one because it reloads so fast, but I think if you opened your aperture, opened it up a little bit, got a little bit bigger picture, you'd had an easier time getting lead fire on the Cromwell. It's got a decent shell velocity, although it's long range. So the closer you are and the higher shell velocity, the less lead fire you need. But at that range, you're definitely going to need some pretty good lead fire. So let's go back to the positioning thing. We'll get this going again. What should you do? Because they have pushed into town pretty good, I would have gone up that middle road. I wouldn't have been YOLO, balls to the wall, but I would have gone up there and seen if I couldn't machine gun down that Type 58. Between you and the Churchill and the camping 131, you probably could have eliminated him from the middle, and now you set up a crossfire from the middle with the guys in town, and you start cleaning up that side of the map. But you decide to go off to the left, and that's okay. I think that would have been my second choice. But they are starting to beat your team over here. But what actually ends up happening because they are so beat up is that some of them will die. The other thing you're doing here, I've talked about this before, I would have been driving in looking this way. So look at what you're getting into instead of just driving and looking straight where you're going. I think you can do both. And that would give you some SA to go, hey, you know what? Some of those guys are pretty beat up. I think I can probably machine gun some of those down. And that's just kind of an SA gathering thing. So the T1 Heavy comes, shoot him. Another shot into him. He dies. I would have been aiming at the T1 to finish him, but it looks like someone hit him and finished him for you. That missed. You hit the T1 Hulk, and that guy goes down. So that really evens up things over here. Looks like the artillery knows you're there, and that's a pretty standard spot, so it's not that big of a surprise. I would tell you right now, I probably would have just left right now and headed to the middle. Why else would that really work? Well, even if you're heading over there and the 43 and the KB1 and the T67 pushed up on you, it's very simple just to turn around and take them on as they try to push over that ridge to your left right there. They're just not beefy enough. That KB1's really hurt. They're just not beefy enough to push you in the WZ-131. You'll just gun them down. Plus, you wouldn't be that far away. You could always turn around and come back down the road. And the artillery knows you're there. They're having a field day shooting at you. The good news is they're missing quite a bit. And now the 131 is pushing. So continue to analyze the game as you go. You've made the choices up to this position. I've talked about a couple different ideas you could have done, but it's really time to make a decision, and it's either go up the middle road or follow up with the 131. You're already over here. The 131's going, so you should have headed with him and push into this valley and clean up whatever is still camping down there. This guy foolishly sticks his face out. I believe he does it one more time and eats another shot. But get up in there and help this WZ-131. And that's where the strength of this TD starts to come in. One of the strengths of this TD is late game. You've got pretty good hit points. These guys are being foolish. They're not really pushing on you. You can come in there and be that assault TD, machine gun them down. And that's directly against what most people feel like this TD should do. You know, most people think, well, I'm too slow. I can't really do the position game. My armor's not good. I don't have a good alpha, so all I can really do is sit in a bush and snipe. But consider the position of the game, where your teammates are on the map. And right now, you could already probably be up there and just about topping where that WZ-131 is, if you'd have moved much earlier and just gunning down these guys that are still hanging out in this Valley of Doom. Plus, you can see the Churchill is now moving up the middle, so that's covered. Definitely start moving now if that's what your worry was. Even if that was your worry, the 131 and the Churchill was sitting back there camping anyway. There wasn't anything that was going to come around behind you onto the cap that those two clowns didn't see. This guy makes another foolish move coming out. And I'm going to go 2 times speed because this takes a while. Eventually, Nonamandus is going to decide that it's time to push. There we go. Here we go. Now we've got something going on. All those hit points you've saved, time to go use them. Ideally, you don't lose them all, but there you go. Alright, moving up on this guy. A couple things technique-wise I will tell you. As you're coming up here, one thing you can do is you can go ahead and highlight him and do a right-click and auto-aim him even though your gun isn't on him. That way when you spin your hole towards him, the gun will come straight online and you might be able to just fire away. If there is some cover that's a problem, you can always unlock it. But at least as you shift your hole, you'll know exactly when your gun comes online. As it is, the dude is shooting HE and he just ends up dying. Machine gun down. Hooray, already hit a dead Hulk. That one hit another dead Hulk. Alright, so here comes the grill, and we're going to have the same mechanical issue as we did shooting at the Cromwell earlier. That was basically directly at the front of the tank, and you just kind of got lucky that you were close enough and the velocity was high enough that you caught him right in the back. So what I'm talking about is zoom out to about here, and then I can't do it because it's come to the stop. Let me see if I can. Well, I can't do it. Can't show you in the sniper mode. But you're going to come out and you're going to aim your gun out in front of him so that when you reload, you've already got lead fire established. And that's sort of what you're doing, but you're just not giving it enough. You see how closely zoomed you were? And you end up missing 2 more right there. So just bad mechanics on your sniper mode, casemate TD firing. That's just something you got to get used to with them. This takes a while to go in, so we got guys all hanging out at the cap. They've cleaned up your guys in town to a large extent because you were so slow pushing them in the valley. And the other thing then that the valley push would have done is you'd have still beat them. This is a pretty funny shot right here. Holy cow, how did you not hit your own guy? You still probably would have beat him, but a good portion of your team that was in the town might also still be alive had you started moving earlier. And this is interesting. You're going to just find a little crack right here, so to speak, and right through there, and good shot. There you go. And again, just a great example of how this, even though it's slow, once you get on your horse and start getting in position, start getting yourself into the fight, it can do plenty of damage. And we end up cleaning that up, and they'll kill the... Artie shows up here in a second, and he ends up dying. So not bad, Nonamandus. You got 1,562, 165 assisted damage right there. And quite honestly, the way to do better on this tank is just your positioning. and your reaction to the game as far as reacting faster, and just understanding that it doesn't matter what tank you're driving. If you position it right and you keep the gun in the game without obviously overextending or some crazy thing like that, you're going to do well in just about any tank. And make sure that you are attempting to leverage its strengths and not worry so much about its weaknesses. You want to try to cover its weaknesses, but don't use a tank's weaknesses as an excuse to hide in a bush in the back all game because you don't feel like you can do anything with it. All right, guys. I hope you learned something. I hope you like what you heard. If you did, make sure you subscribe. And as always, we will see you.